37 people. Amazing. Hi,
Yeah.
everyone.
Hey guys, I want to kind of invite everyone here to our fourth panel here for the PEAC and Global Shapers Leadership and Service Series. We're very delighted to have Ms. Kaitlyn Allen here, the President and CEO of Global Affairs Associates, which is a boutique consulting firm which works in the ESG sector. And like she was mentioning earlier, she's a native Estonian and she has 2 kids. Great to have you here today, Miss Allen.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure. I always love talking to young people, and this is just a real pleasure for me. So thanks for giving me some of your time as well to hear about something that you may never heard about.
No, I think ESG and consulting in general is just a great field that a lot of our students are quite interested in. So I think they'll be very happy to hear, what you have to say on those topics.
Awesome. Well, let's start with defining ESG, because we're all saying ESG, and I wonder how many people know what we're talking about.
For sure. So could you start us off there and kind of just give us a base overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. So that's a term that comes from the business community, but it's sort of the business community's way of talking about very important topics like corporate responsibility and sustainability. So I can imagine you guys are all Gen Zers. Y'all are way ahead of where even we were, when we were in high school and in college in terms of your awareness about environmental issues. So I think I probably don't have to define sustainability, but the general, in general, it's about living on our planet within our means, within our planet's means, right? That's what we're talking about. So ESG is the term that the investment community, and that's investors meaning everyone that invests in publicly traded companies. So big companies, you think of ExxonMobil, Nike, whoever the Gap, whatever companies that exist that you purchase things from, goods or services, how do they fit into the world of sustainability, right? And so what we're witnessing live, which has been amazing the past several years, is this huge transformation in how businesses think of themselves in the world. And the old paradigm from, I don't know if you guys are taking econ yet, but if you're taking the economics classes, you've probably studied Milton Friedman, one of the most well-known economists of the 20th century. He is very famous for saying that the purpose of a business, the purpose of a private company, is to return profits to its shareholders. And that is all fine and dandy, except it led to all kinds of crazy, what economists call externalities. So unintended consequences that have had really negative impacts on the environment and on society in general. So we're actually, and by live, I mean in the past 18 months, seeing a huge shift in all of the dialogue around what the role of business is in the world. And the terms that you can Google after this are shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism. So I challenge you to go look those up after, and I can send a bunch of links for you guys as well. But we're watching this shift live to the purpose of a corporation is not just about profits, but it's also about serving the world and having a fundamental purpose that serves society in some way. So it's a very exciting time to be looking at sustainability issues, at ESG issues, because there's real movement in the corporate world about this.
I think, sustainability is something that has been coming up a lot recently. And we had a really great conversation last week with some, other people working in the field. So I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on some, recent, what trends, are going on in the ESG field. What are some new ways these businesses are adopting to the way they should serve the community?
Well, I'll tell you from where we sit. So
Mm-hmm.
we focus specifically on corporate transparency and reporting. So I'm sure you're all aware, even if you're not aware of all the terminology yet, but the government, the federal government in the US and different governments around the world, have ways of regulating and monitoring companies for being honest and transparent about their financials, right? Are they lying to investors, or are they really making money?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all reported to an entity called the Securities and Exchange Commission,
Mm-hmm.
the SEC. That's a US government institution. So those are called that's financial reporting. So if you're decide to study accounting or sometimes economics, and you go to work for a private company, you're helping them make sure that they're accurately reporting their financial information to the SEC. That's one of the roles of accountants. However, that system is set up for financials and not necessarily set up to capture all the right information
Mm-hmm.
about a company's social and environmental impact. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what we do is there's actually hundreds of voluntary frameworks for companies to disclose that kind of information, but it's not regulated. It's voluntary. So that means that every company can decide for itself what to report and how. So as ESG reporting consultants, what we do is help companies decide what to report and how, because it's not laid out by the law.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we do. And so I would say one of the big things in terms of trends is that push for more reporting and more transparency. That's actually been around a long time, but and by a long time I mean about 23 years now. The Global Reporting Initiative was founded in 1997 to push that additional corporate transparency. Where we are today is post-Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement, which was the agreement that the whole world at the time in 2015 agreed to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions to basically stop climate change. That agreement, the Paris Agreement, has led to a lot of additional requests for information on the part of investors, governments, et cetera, that want to make sure that corporations, A, know what the Paris Agreement is, B, understand their role in reducing emissions so that we as a society can basically halt climate change. So that's, I would say, from where I sit in terms of reporting and transparency, that's the biggest trend, is this push for additional, not only information about your impact, but also how are you responding to climate change, and how is your company going to meet its obligations under the Paris Agreement.
So, being a leader in this ESG field, as yourself, so, what advice would you give to these high schoolers and college students that want to necessarily, follow this field of trying to solve these huge problems like climate change and figuring out how, we can be more sustainable with our resources? What are some steps that they can take to, to start to move in this direction?
Yes, absolutely. So I tell everybody, my biggest and only regret about college is that I did not take business classes. Believe it or not. I'm a business consultant. I've never taken a single college business course. That's been a really, really unnecessarily hard hurdle for me. Whereas if I had just taken a couple of business classes in college, it would have been a lot easier to turn my passion, what I do about sustainable development, into a business and to serve businesses. So what I always tell folks is, the world is so interdependent and interconnected. We need people in every single field to know about what these issues are and know about how they fit in and how their chosen field fits into the solution. Because this is not like, oh, you need to go get a sustainability degree. Those didn't even exist when I was in college. And that wasn't that long ago. 2008 is when I started college. There weren't sustainability degrees. So you don't need a degree in this, but everyone following your passion. If your passion is accounting and you love numbers and you really want to be an accountant, do that and educate yourself on these issues. Take policy classes so that you understand how you as an accountant can fit into the solution, right? Same with, if your passion is art, if your passion is art and you want to have a career doing art, take business classes too, so that you can turn that passion into a living and also help the organizations that you want to support. When I first got out of college, I only thought I ever wanted to work for nonprofits. And I really quickly learned that that's awesome and you can make a career in that space. But I really realized that who was making the decisions were the big corporations. And so that the more people that are passionate about this, that start filling those roles and those ranks in the corporations or externally as consultants, the more we can help people understand how they can fit into being a part of the solution, and that it is a problem that affects everybody. So my nutshell is follow your passion, know what you really want to do with your skill and what you want to do, and then understand how it fits into the bigger picture, because every single human has a role to play in this, in solving this.
So, being like a successful entrepreneur yourself, what are some challenges you faced? I mean, because from the outside, it looks like, these people are so successful. And, we were just wondering if you could kind of tell us some challenges or roadblocks that you faced, along the way to becoming, starting, leading a successful consulting firm.
Yeah, it's not all roses. I think that's true for a lot of kids. I myself remember, being in high school and thinking, that's what I want to do. Or, how did they get there? Like, it seems like it's a hard thing to process. Like, she's only X age. How did she do that in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years out of school? And the answer to that is it's day by day. It doesn't happen overnight, right? And even now, there are years when my income is great from consulting, and then there are years where it's terrible. So it's not all that it seems from the outside, right? But as a consultant and entrepreneur, you have to really push on the outside to make sure your voice is out there and people are hearing you and that you have something to say, right? So challenges, figuring out business was a huge challenge for me, and completely unnecessary. Like I said, please, everybody take business classes. Take at least one class where you have to write a business plan. So yeah, learning business, and then, finding my voice, I think has been really, really challenging. And I think that's a lot of internal work. I think we grew up in a world, and particularly y'all that have grown up with phones the whole time. I feel for you. I cannot imagine, because they're addictive even for me. And I'm, I didn't grow up with it. So even for me, it's addictive. I can only imagine what it's like to grow up with that around you and with people throwing screens in your face all the time. It's that pulls you external to live in a world that is not within you. And so I think finding that inner strength, that inner peace, the ability to shut off the external world and really listen to your soft, still voice inside of you, and not listening to what other people say, not listening to what social media says, and like just removing yourself from that. The ability to have a routine where you do that every single day, you connect with yourself internally. That is I think the absolutely fundamental part to being able to find your voice, to figure out what that passion is. Every single person has a purpose. Every single person has a passion. But if you're always plugged into other people feeding you information, you'll never figure out what it is. You're just going to be confused. So shut that stuff off and like get to know your inner world. I think that's been how I've been able to find my voice on things. It used to be very hard for me even as a consultant, to say my opinion
Mm-hmm.
to my clients, which is my job. And I've done so much inner work on that. And I'm much more comfortable now really telling folks the way it is. Like, no, guys, it's climate change is real. Like, get over it. You know, there's still people that don't believe that's
Oh yeah,
real.
for sure.
So
Mm-hmm.
it used to be me tiptoeing around those conversations. And now I can just be like, look, guys, the train's leaving the station. You'll either get on, you get off. I don't care if you come with me. So,
No,
yeah.
that's interesting to hear. So, is there anything specific that you do like to find that inner voice? So I think you told me
Mm-hmm.
earlier, right? You said you do like meditation, reading. Meditation is something I practice myself. It's given me a lot of clarity.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you do on a daily basis per se, or anything that our students can start to build these great habits?
Yeah. Yeah. I will. Okay. Very simply, just detach and detox from the outside world. And that might mean your phone, that might mean, your family, that might mean your friends. It's not to say permanently do that. It's just give yourself breathing room every day to not be bombarded by the external world.
Mhm.
So you can, enjoy, like, spend whatever an hour on Instagram or whatever it is, I don't know, or whatever y'all do nowadays. TikTok, I guess. Spend
Oh, TikTok is huge.
do whatever you want. I'm not saying don't do any of that. I'm saying make sure you carve out time for you every day where you can shut off the external world. And that might start as 5 minutes. It might start as 10 minutes. Like I'll tell you one thing. So I was telling Michelle, I have 2 businesses actually and 2 kids. I have Global Affairs Associates, which is my consulting firm. And I actually have a startup that I'm working on. And I have 2 children under 5, and I'm married, and we have it's a lot. If you're like, how do you do all that? I'm like, I don't waste my time with a lot of external stuff. Like a lot of people, and again, I'm not saying it's bad to watch Netflix. I do it too, but I don't make that like the core of my day and how I relax, right? So everybody has different things that draw them, or whether it's writing in a journal, art, running, exercising, whatever it is. Like, find something where you can really tune out everything else
Mhm.
and hear yourself. And the more regularly you do that, the more you'll start being able to recognize what's the like, jammer of the outside world telling me to do this, and I think I should do that, and well, I better take this class. No. The more you can cut that off and dedicate time to it every day, the more you'll start to hear your intuition
Mhm.
and start to recognize what's intuition and what's just trash that the world wants to tell you is important to you or should be important to you.
Mhm.
There's a great book I read actually when I was 16, I think in high school, by Joseph Campbell, called The Power of Myth. He's a mythologist I think he passed away in the 80s, but it's a very powerful book about, he talks about follow your bliss, right? Follow what you just can't stop doing, whether that's running or art or, writing business plans or whatever it is, finding that bliss and dedicating time to it and shutting off the external world,
Mhm. No, I think it's a very powerful thing just to find your voice, like you said, because then you
Mm-hmm.
can really make decisions aligned to what you want to do. So thank you for
Exactly.
that. So something here at Peak that we believe in is that leadership and service goes hand in hand. A lot of our students and chapters, they go with this motto of trying to serve their community. So we were wondering, to what degree has service played a role in your career?
Um, well, I mean, it's always been a part of, how I spend my time. But having a family changes that a lot because your service is 24/7 to your babies and small children. So now what I do is I do things like this. So I will always say yes if it's about talking to people about, what I do, because that's how I got here. Like I
Mhm.
said, I told you I didn't ever take a business class. Like, how did I even get my first gig, right? It was people like this taking time to talk to me and hear, oh, wow, you do have this interesting skill set. This is really different. I think this could fit in this business. I will always take the time to do that. So it's that. And then I also serve on a couple of, I guess I'm now serving on the Global Shapers Hub as an on the advisory board. And I also serve on a board for the Baker Institute for Public Policy, which is at Rice University. If you haven't heard of it, almost all of their events are free. It's like this little known gem in Houston. But if you have any interest in policy, in energy, in inequity, healthcare, Latin America, they have a Mexico Center. The Baker Institute for Public Policy is amazing. You should all check it out. And I'm on the Latin America committee for the Young Professionals program. So one of the things we're actually trying to do is get the word out. I think sometimes Rice has this a perception of being an elitist type institution, and the Baker Institute especially, because they bring people like President Obama, they bring people like James Baker and heads of the world to come and speak. But it is almost always free and open to the public. And of course, we're not doing in-person events now, but there's a lot of resources online. So yeah, so service is always important. And even if it's not a formal volunteer thing, like as I've gotten older, it's not about counting volunteer hours, right? It's about, serving my family, so my parents are aging, serving my friends, and then serving the people around me. Of course, serving on these boards where I've gotten a chance to get to know some really cool organizations.
Yeah, I think, making an impact in whatever like our students do is one of the important things. So that's why, we wanted to ask that question. This is going to be the last question before we, let the audience chime in and ask some questions. So an important topic, with all this things going on right now in the current situation with, George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, what is the importance of diversity and equal opportunity in the workplace, is becoming more and more prevalent, right? There's a lot of data on how, there's not that much diversity in boards of companies. What are some ways that we as the youth, right, or what are some ways just in general that, we can increase diversity in the workplace? And I just don't mean by like, oh yeah, we're going to add, a Chinese person, we're going to add like a black person. Like, what are some ways we can actually make an inclusive work environment? Because our students are budding entrepreneurs. So, this is something that they deal with on a daily basis.
Well, first I'll just say, so there's actually a whole field. If you're really passionate about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, there's actually a whole field called D&I, diversity and inclusion. Some people flip it and call it I&D, inclusion and diversity, because you can't have an inclusive environment without diversity. And there's a whole, people will tell you which one they want to put first. But the point is, they're actually established organizations and programs where you can actually learn to be a D&I professional in the workplace and work for a human resources department. That is not my expertise, but I refer out to a couple of companies. It's actually, so I sent you, Vishal, the podcast where, Yvonne Harris and Arkella interview us on entrepreneurship in general, and he'll make sure you get that link after if you want to check it out. They are D&I experts. So that's actually a field, right? So those are two people you might want to follow on LinkedIn, or just, Google diversity and inclusion programs. There's tons of them out there. I think for us, what we do as sustainable development professionals, so I don't know if you've heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but that's the United Nations driven but global agenda for sustainable development. It's what most companies are using when they're asking themselves, how are we making a positive impact? They're looking at the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, for a reference, right? And those goals include very specific targets and metrics on equality, on equal access, on discrimination, on eliminating discrimination. So it's part of, if you're doing ESG, it's part of the conversation. Now, we are not HR professionals that have studied D&I, so that piece of it we refer out. But when it comes to actually what you report as a company, we always encourage our clients, no matter how bad it's looking on their numbers, to start disclosing their diversity metrics. So that's one of the other things. It goes back to the question of regulated versus voluntary. It's not a requirement, federal requirement for any company to disclose their diversity metrics. It's not required. So right. It takes people like us to say, y'all really need to get on this and y'all really need to disclose this. So there's just different points there that you can push on. But if you're really interested in the field, study it, take a class on it, study HR, work for an HR department, right? There's so many things you can do from a technical perspective, of course. And then of course, individually, we all have to do our own learning and take the actions within our own lives. And that also goes back to internal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things stem from that, but, thank you for your response on that. So what we want to do now is kind of open up the floor for any questions from students directly to Kaitlyn. You can either come off mute and ask your question, or you can send it in the chat and I'll read it. And I think we already have a couple questions here. So let me start off with Vaishno's. He says, how are the companies you serve, and in general, the biggest companies in the world, working on the issue of sustainability?
Oh, well, that's a lot of companies. I would say that right now, today, like I mentioned, well, let me back up and give you a little context. So we work primarily in the Houston area. We do have a client in Oklahoma, but being in Houston, most of our clients have some relationship to oil and gas if they're not an oil and gas company themselves. So we, by default, have become quite well versed in the language of energy transition. Mm-hmm. So if you're not familiar with that concept, there's some great short videos online that can tell you kind of the history of energy in the world. But basically, we went from biomass, so things from the earth, right? Wood burning, fires, etc. Even 120 years ago, right? 100 years ago, that was pretty common, to fossil fuels. So that's coal, oil, natural gas, that really did an amazing job of lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. Mm-hmm. And of course, then we later learned, oops, that was really bad for the planet, right? So when we talk about energy transition today, we've actually had many energy transitions throughout the history of the world. And what happens is, it's not that one goes away. People still burn wood fires. In fact, millions of people around the world don't have access to electricity. So it's not that one way goes away. It's that we add and diversify our sources of power, right? Our sources of energy. So today's energy transition, and you can, if you Google it, you'll find tons of work on this, is how do we diversify away from our huge reliance on fossil fuels and increase our reliance on renewables. Okay. So that's when I can't speak for every company in the world, but when I speak for, in general, the Houston region and oil and gas in general, there's a massive amount of money, time, resource, commitments, focus going into energy transition, because what folks have basically realized, and not everybody has, but the most important ones are in Houston and in industry, is that the energy transition is happening, climate change is real, and Houston can either get on board the train, or we can get left behind and, lose tons and tons of jobs and have it really hurt our economy. So what's happening right now live today, and you can start going to the events, is Houston is basically transforming from an oil and gas town to an energy town, a clean energy town. So one of the coolest things that just happened yesterday, is that a very important clean tech incubator. So business incubator, that's an organization that basically supports early stage businesses in their development.
I think they signed with your Turner, right? Yeah.
Yes, they are coming to Houston. They
Mhm.
are opening a branch in Houston. That was just announced yesterday.
Mhm.
And I have a contact that told me there's actually going to be another one coming.
Oh, wow.
I don't know which one.
Mhm.
So basically, you're in Houston now. This is an awesome time to learn about energy, where it comes from, energy transition, and then attend. You can watch it live. You can. Of course, we're watching now. We're not going to events, but you can watch people in Houston grapple with this issue and be a part of that conversation as to how we basically transition to a low carbon economy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So sorry, and I didn't fully close the circle on your question. That's where I would say most, at least in my sectors that I work on, that's where almost all the energy is right now, is on energy transition. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that yesterday. I was like, wow, this is a lot of great stuff going on in Houston. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
So we'll do these last two questions, and I think we can.
I'm okay to stay a little extra time if y'all want to continue the conversation.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think Shastrik asked here, he said, other than working from home, how has this pandemic affected your job?
Well, so in general, like I said, this is all industry specific, right? So when you work primarily in energy right now, for those of y'all who aren't aware of it, what the pandemic did was basically decrease almost overnight the demand for energy. So that's all energy, right? The demand for renewables, whatever, but particularly the demand for gasoline, because of planes and cars basically
Mhm.
stopping. So what that did to the energy companies in general is basically, imagine your income is based on how much the price of a barrel of what you sell is, right? So not only did demand, it's like we've already been in a price slump for several years now, and then you drop demand, you basically had literal like backups. Companies were literally paying companies to take that commodity off of their field, because it's very, very hard to shut in a well and turn it back on again in general. So you don't want to necessarily shut the well off, but you've got so much excess that it basically just creates total havoc in the market. So there's multiple things happening here. I'm trying to simplify, but basically you have this huge economic hit to energy companies combined with a pandemic, right? With COVID. So a lot of companies right now are preparing for bankruptcy, trying to keep the lights on, doing PPP to pay people if they're a small company, obviously, trying to survive, right? So in the short term, the past couple of months, it's been pretty hard to get new work focused on ESG energy transition, because a lot of them are just like preparing to file for bankruptcy. Let's be real. That's what's happening. However, everything you're seeing out of the influential and I would say very progressive companies like BP, Shell, Total, all three of those companies have, and actually BP announced their reduction target like right before all this in February. But Total and Shell, two of the biggest majors in the world, announced their net zero goals. So basically they will be a net zero emissions company. They announced those during COVID. So I think, to me, that's an indicator that ESG, sustainability, energy transition, it is absolutely not going away. In fact, this is, and the highest, most important voices in the land are saying it. The International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, you can look him up too, just came out today with a plan for governments to follow to basically accelerate sustainable development and energy transition by taking advantage of the drop in demand. And like basically there, if you look for hashtag build back better, you'll see a lot of that come up. So short term for my business, not so great. 6 months, maybe 12 months, I think it's going to just totally make up for this time, because the companies are like, okay, all right, sign us up for the climate report. We got to do that now, because the acceleration is happening. And that's what always happens. I mean, there's tons of books and literature on that, but when something crumbles, it has to crumble for you to build back something else, right? And that's true within ourselves at every level of humanity, right? Inside yourself, sometimes you just have to crumble to be able to rebuild. Within a family, within a city, within a country, and definitely within the world. So I think what we're seeing right now is just this massive opportunity to build back better.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll also benefit from that as a company as this goes along. Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, that's what a couple of my OP friends in the oil and gas company that work, they were currently telling me, that they're kind of scared about the short-term effects. But I think, moving forward, like you said, there's great opportunity here to rebuild in the right direction. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts in general about recently, President Trump was talking about an infrastructure bill. Is there an opportunity? Because I know building infrastructure is a way to kind of also advance, the sustainability goals. Is that a possibility in the coming term if there is new infrastructure growth?
Well, absolutely. And there's actually a video we did just last week. I think I just published it this week, actually. It's on our website, go to our blog. There's actually, you might have heard of LEED buildings, LEED. That's the certification process to get, to basically certify that your building has taken a lot of very serious environmental considerations into the planning process. So that's a LEED certified building. There's actually a similar certification for infrastructure. So for bridges, anything that a municipality, a city, or a state would build. Bridges, water treatment plants, whatever those major infrastructure things are. And it's called Envision. So you can watch that video. I interviewed Michael Bloom, who is an Envision professional in Houston, an engineer. Again, you can be an engineer, live your passion, and do sustainability. That's Michael Bloom. Check him out. But yeah, I think absolutely, if we can get some sort of commitment that say all new infrastructure will be Envision certified, that's a huge thing. There's also really cool new technologies out there that store carbon in concrete. So that's a whole other way to basically take carbon, sequester it. You're keeping it out of the atmosphere in new concrete. And Hawaii has done that a lot. If you look up Hawaii, I guess it's carbon concrete. It has some sort of name, but you can read about that as well.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. So Jabria is asking, what is something that you have learned unintentionally that has stuck with you over the years? And why do you think this knowledge has stuck with you?
Something I've learned unintentionally. It's a really good one. Well, I guess I almost want to say it's like I learned business matters unintentionally. Like I didn't set out for that. After college, I worked at refugee resettlement agencies, and then I went to DC and did a master's there and worked at the State Department. And actually what I wanted to do was be a foreign service officer. So that's the US diplomats that live and work in embassies and consulates overseas. That's what I wanted to do. And I got back to Houston because I got married and moved here for my husband. I'm from here, so it was like, oh, it makes sense. My family's there. That's great. It'll be good to have kids there. It's an international city. I'll find what I want. And I just didn't. I could not find a job that I could really fathom doing. And so, with zero knowledge of what it meant to have a business, I started a business. And there's tons and tons and tons of free resources out there for people. I really encourage you to listen to this podcast, not because it's me, but to support my friends that just started this. It's called Women Who Rock. I'm sure you'll get the link after. But that's part of that journey, is like, it feels so daunting. Oh, a business, I can't do that. I have no business degree. Where do I even go? And a friend of mine who was an accountant told me about SCORE, SCORE, which is an association of retired business people that basically just donate their time mentoring new business owners. So I went there and like walked out with this to-do list of how to, like, okay, file for my business name at the courthouse. Oh, okay, I can do that. It's $15, you know? It seems like there's so much around it, but and yes, there's so much to it. And I've learned so much on the job, and it's been so painful sometimes. But those little details that you think are, oh, someone else can do that, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I think that's been the biggest unintentional learning of my life, is that I am a business person. I am an entrepreneur. I am really, really good at business strategy. Would have had no idea. I would have had no idea. I would have been a diplomat, and I would have had to say the party line no matter where I was in the world or what I believed. And I would have never, I mean, yeah,
No,
I had no idea. I'm really good at business.
no, I think that speaks to say, like, you know, looking for your inner voice just in general, again, comes back to that. It's a really important thing. You know, so I think someone here is asking, you know, what tips do you have on networking per se? Because I guess at
Okay.
colleges,
Yes, this is so important for y'all. Yeah.
because I
Go
think at
ahead.
colleges it's a big deal. Usually, they try to, you know, stress the fact of reaching out to individuals in the field, talking to them, understanding what they do. You know, so we were just wondering, what tips do you have on networking in general?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Number one, I'll say it again. Go inside first and find your own confidence and authenticity about what you really want to do. And I'll tell you why this is so important. I can tell the difference, like that, between someone that's coming up to me because they think they should know about sustainability, but you know, really in their heart, they're an engineer. And they think they need to be talking to me about something. They're not sure what they want to talk about. They don't really have a goal for the conversation. They're just like, their heart's not in it.
Mm.
So people know that, and that's just anybody. People know that right off the bat if your heart's not really in it. If you discover what it is that really lights you up, what you're really authentically passionate about, what you want to learn about, like, because you will stay up till midnight reading about it. You love it so much. If you find out what that is, and then you try and network, people will respond like that. They will respond so positively because they can sense that you are authentically interested in talking about this topic.
Mm.
So one, go inside, find out what that is. And it might be multiple things, and you don't have to choose and settle on anything, right? I did 2 multidisciplinary degrees because I couldn't choose one thing. So it's okay to be passionate about more than one thing, but find out what those things are and engage with people on those topics, okay? 2, make it really easy for that person. Really easy for that person. So by that, I mean, first do your homework, look at the website. If there's a contact form or a number, like, use those resources. They have put them out there for a reason. You know, use those. Use the contact form, use the calendar scheduler, use the phone number that's listed, whatever it is. Don't like message someone on LinkedIn and be like, hi, you know, I'd really like to email you. Can I have your email? Like, go to my website. That's why the website's there. You know what I mean? So make it easy on the person. And then I have personally found that if you have a good reason, that good, authentic reason for connecting, and you ask for 15 minutes just to hear about that person's journey, I guarantee you that 99% of the time they'll say yes.
Mm.
And so it's A, authenticity, B, make it easy for the person. Don't ask things that are already public, like do your homework. And another very simple thing you can do is suggest several times, and never suggest for the next day or the same week, because most people have their calendars already booked out. Be like, you know, in 2 or 3 weeks, right? Here are some times that I'm available. if they work for you. And if they don't, please suggest something else. But I would really appreciate hearing about your career journey, even if it's just 15 minutes, right? Right. What I say, go inside, know what you're passionate about, know why you want to connect, make it easy for the person, do the thinking for them. That's why I say, like, suggest times or use their calendar thing. It's like not additional thing you're asking them to do. And listen, be really good at listening. And, it's good to have a list of questions that you kind of can multi-purpose for different people, and think about what those are in advance, but just like be natural, just talk to people. We're all just humans. And, if someone has a big ego about it and doesn't want to spend your time, then, forget them. I'll find somebody else to talk to. So for every rude person that thinks they are the SHIT, that doesn't want to talk to you, there's 5 more like me that will take the time, because we recognize that's how we got here too.
Mm. No, I totally agree with you there. And I think, one more thing that we could add to that is just don't be scared. I think something that I found pretty useful is just reach out to, like you said, you got to be interested in the field first. But, if you feel like you really want to talk to the person, don't be scared, just go for it. So,
yeah. And if they don't respond, like, follow up at least once. Like, don't leave it on them to remember. You know what I mean? Like, that's, I think, the biggest thing. And I know I did it too, and have done it, where, I'll think a non-reply means they're not interested and they're ignoring me. It probably means they have 500 emails in their inbox and they have not gotten to yours yet. Or just, you haven't made it easy for them to respond. So I think that's a lot of it too. So don't take any of that personally. Just find your passions, find the tribe around those passions, go to the events. The easiest way to connect with someone is something like this, where you can be like, I heard you speak on XYZ and I really thought it was awesome. Find something you can talk about. And don't be scared. Yeah, don't be scared. Come from a place of your own. Again, what are we doing? Back to the inside. Your own reason for being is just as important as the CEO of BP's reason for being. You're just younger. That's all.
No, I think that was really powerful there, Miss Allen. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
So I think this is going to be our last question here. So very quickly, I think we discussed this, but I guess Maya wants a little bit more information. And again, this is going to be our last question here. What are some steps, some preliminary steps that we can take as Gen Z to limit the effects of climate change?
Okay. Yeah. Great question. So let me make a distinction. A lot of people equate sustainability with environmentally friendly or friendlier. So that happens a lot in advertising, where you have a product that claims it's sustainable, but really what it is completely unsustainable, meaning it can't be replicated over time for 7 generations out and still, not run out the supply of whatever it is. Let's say, loofahs. Everybody's all about like natural loofahs now. Well, where do you think they're getting the natural loofahs? You know what I mean? They're coming from the sea. So people will market things. A lot of companies market. It's called greenwashing. They market something as sustainable, but really, okay, maybe it's more environmentally friendly than plastic, but it's not sustainable if you're taking out all of the reef, all of the coral and everything out of harvesting it, right? It's sustainable if it is built on a farm that is specifically built to harvest something like that and has a regenerative cycle. That's sustainable. So I think one of the things we can do at any age is be educated consumers. Educate yourself on the products you're buying. Ask yourself who made this. Look on the back. Oh, I didn't know this was actually made by whatever, name some big corporation. It looks all, rustic and cool and natural. And it's like really just the Prego brand, right? And I'm not saying anything bad about Prego. I don't know. I'm just saying, do your homework, be educated consumers, know the difference between something that's environmentally friendly and sustainable, and call companies out on it. You know, if you see something being marketed incorrectly and you feel that you know, do it respectfully, say, I'm sorry, I'm confused. I thought sustainable meant this. It doesn't appear that you have a sustainable business model, or you don't have a sustainable product. Could you tell me more about why you're using that term? You know, always respectful. But that's a great way. Y'all are, and sorry, I'm generalizing. Maybe there's some of y'all that don't, you know, get online, but in general, y'all are online all the day, all day, you know, you're tweeting or whatever. I'm very old compared to you. So whatever you're doing online, you know, how much of what you're doing, that action could actually be commenting on businesses and asking those questions, right? Comment on a business's link, say, oh, this product claims it's sustainable, but it's not clear to me how it is. Could you provide more information on that? You know, spend your time online being an activist, being a respectful activist, but being an activist and asking tough questions to those companies. I will tell you that there are 3 reasons. This is what we always go back to, our trends and drivers of why ESG investing is a thing, why responsible investing, why are all these companies freaking out about what to report? There's 3 reasons. One is there's actually research and evidence that companies that, you know, perform well on certain ESG indicators actually do better stock value wise. 2, all the changing nature of global risk, the Paris Agreement, the policy stuff that I mentioned before. Do you know what number 3 is? Millennials and Gen Z care. That is the 3rd reason. And it is cited. You can go look at it. I'm not making this up. This is not a GAA study. This is like big studies, big financial institutions recognizing that the power of, and I'm an elder millennial, so I'm turning 35. Our generation was the first generation to actually care. Mm-hmm. And we have access to the tools to push companies on it. And you know, Gen Z even more. Like some of the things I've seen that have come around since you name it, whatever's happening in the world, basically calling people out on their BS, using their social media or their TikTok or whatever. Here's this little research project. Probably took y'all like 20 minutes to put it together. And someone like me sees, I'm like, this is amazing. Gen Z is going to save us, right? Because we don't think that what we do as individuals matters, but I'm telling you, the biggest financial institutions in the world are listening. They're listening to millennials and Gen Z, and they know we can smell their BS. Mm-hmm. And that's why the financial system is changing and is greening, and it's happening live. So we're pillar 3. Individuals, we are pillar 3. So call companies, hold them accountable, ask the questions, ask on social media, again, respectfully, because the other methods don't usually get you a response. But if you ask respectfully, they might actually respond.
No, I think social media, you know, is a super, you know, important tool. Like we don't really think of it as like a tool to make change, but, you know, given that how fast information flows, especially like, you know, I'm new to Twitter. I got it a couple months ago, and I was surprised at, you know, how fast information just generally flows on Twitter. So I'm total agreement, you know, with you there.
Yeah. And corporate communications teams, like the people that work in corporate communications, so they basically write the articles or the statements on behalf of companies, whatever, they shake in their boots to think that something could go wrong on Twitter. I'm telling you, like many of them have retainer deals with crisis communications firms, even though they have no crisis, just because they want to be able to pick up the phone the second a bad tweet comes out. Mm-hmm. Like it matters. What you do online matters. So I would just say keep doing it, do it respectfully, but keep doing it. Oh, one other thing, and I know we're almost at 5:00, but and I know this is a little abstract for you if you're still in high school, but when you have a job at a corporation or wherever, actually any job in the US, you know, you've probably heard of a 401k or an IRA. Those are your retirement funds. Same with anyone who owns anything in the stock market, right? You can now ask those companies for an ESG fund. Mm-hmm. Like, so, and those, by the way, usually outperform their benchmarks, right? So it's actually, you can make more money long term by investing in more responsible companies. It's pretty much a triple win. So once you start one of those, or talk to your parents if they have them, open that dialogue with whoever manages your 401k. Open that dialogue and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I want to make sure that, you name it, XYZ is not in my portfolio. I don't want to fund X, Y, or Z. And, maybe I want to participate in a gender diversity fund. Mm-hmm. Morgan Stanley has that fund as a product available you can invest in. So, that's about it. Also, don't join Robinhood. It's an absolute sham, just in case you're playing around with stocks. It's, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But get in legit stocks. Like, even if you have a few $100s saved and you want to play around, and I'm not saying you should at this point, but if you do, try a gender diversity fund. Try something that really gets you going, a clean energy fund, whatever it is. Yeah. So you have a voice there too.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything you've encompassed for us in this conversation was extremely powerful for us. I know it was for me. Just to learn about ESG and consulting and business and entrepreneurship in general. I really want to thank you, for taking time out of the day to come speak with us and just bestow some, wisdom and experience. I know we all really appreciate it. For the audience here, I will be forwarding the podcast link that Ms. Kaitlyn Allen sent us to it today. So please be sure to take a listen to it, learn a little bit more about Ms. Kaitlyn Allen's background, how she came up, and things like that. So again, I want to thank you again, Ms. Allen. We really appreciate it. And
I'm so happy to have spent the time. I hope it was useful. And, again, if you take anything else away from this, and don't forget everything else I said, go inside. Go inside. You will find the answer.
Even if it sounds so simple, it's really an important thing, and I can definitely speak to that as well. So thank you for your time, Ms. Allen. We really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you, and have a great day and the rest of the weekend, guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.